Today we'll be recapping a horror mystery film titled Orphan, released in 2009. Kate is in labor and walks into a hospital with her husband, John. She gets wheeled away and soon starts bleeding. She wakes up in an operating room, surrounded by medical staff. The nurse then tells her that her baby is dead and Kate can't believe it. Her husband comes in and starts filming the birth, as if everything was okay. The nurse hands her the infant. Kate is screaming and suddenly wakes up in her bed. She gets up and goes to the bathroom, looking at the scar on her belly. The next day, Kate is at therapy, where Dr. Browning explains that nightmares as those are a normal response to the trauma of stillbirth. Kate wonders if the nightmare was about that or about the fact that she will adopt a child soon. Since Kate's been having second thoughts, the therapist tells her that she has to decide if she will go through with it. Later, Kate goes to pick up her deaf daughter, Max, from school. Soon after, Kate plays the piano and composes some music. She gets irritated by some noise she hears, so she goes outside and sees that Max is throwing a basketball on the wall. She asks her to stop and her daughter apologizes. John gets home with their son, Daniel, and the three of them play around with the basketball. That night, when Kate is putting Max to bed, she asks her if she'll get a new sister. She then gets into bed with John and they talk about the adoption, deciding to go through with it. Days later, they are seen driving into an orphanage. Sister Abigail meets them up front and tells them to look around. Kate stays on the first floor, looking at the little girls playing, and John goes to the second floor. He walks inside a room, where Esther is painting. She tells him an amazing story about the painting she's making, as Kate and Abigail walk into the room. John introduces them and the three of them continue to talk. The girl says that nobody has ever talked to her before because she's different. The couple seems to like Esther, so they talk to Abigail about adopting her. Abigail tells them that she was originally from Russia and that the people who brought her to the United States died in a house fire. 3 weeks later, they pick her up from the orphanage and thank Abigail. In the car, Kate teaches Esther sign language. They get home and Max is excited to see them. Esther introduces herself right away, asking Kate how much she can hear. She tells her that she can hear just enough so that she can read people's lips. Once inside, they meet Grandma Barbara and Daniel. The latter seems jealous of Esther, especially when she gives John a big hug. As Kate gets ready to go to bed, we see a storm brewing. Esther wakes up in the middle of the night and goes to Max's room. Meanwhile, John and Kate are making love. Soon there's a knock on the door and it's the two girls asking to sleep in their bed. Esther wants to sleep next to John. The next morning, Esther comes down in a fancy dress, causing the other children to laugh. The girl tells Kate there's nothing wrong in being different and she lets her wear it. As she is being welcomed in class by her teacher, one of her classmates makes fun of her. That day, Max and Esther play on the frozen lake. When Kate sees them, she yells that doing that isn't allowed. Later, Kate goes into her room to put away her laundry and finds an old Bible stuck in a drawer. She looks through it and finds a photo of a man inside. At school, Daniel's friends are making fun of him because of Esther, so he pushes her books over. When she goes to pick them up, a girl from her class finds her Bible and as they fight for it, it falls on the ground. Esther screams. Later, Kate starts teaching her how to play the piano. Then she asks her about the incident at the school, but Esther doesn't want to talk about it. Esther suddenly asks her about the baby she lost. Kate then tells her what happened, as she shows her the flowers where they scattered her ashes. After dinner, thinking the kids are sleeping, Kate and John make love in the kitchen. Esther hears them and appears. The next morning, Kate goes to her to talk about it. As she paints, Esther seems to not care, saying she knows about it and even uses the F word. Kate and John talk about it later and she thinks they should take her to a therapist. John takes the girls to a park and one of his neighbors comes over to flirt with him. In the meantime, Esther's bully comes into the playground as well. Esther's attention is divided between her and John's conversation. When the bully goes play in the castle, as she's about to go down a slide, Esther pushes her and causes her leg to break. Max sees her do it. At dinner that night, John talks to Esther about it and Max lies, confirming that the girl slipped. Daniel seems jealous of Esther and starts calling her names, but the parents intervene. After he runs off, angry and cursing, John puts a lock on his treehouse as punishment for his actions. Later, Kate is at the store with the girls when Sister Abigail calls her. Kate steps aside and tells her about what has been going on, while Max reads her lips and tells Esther. That night, Kate is surprised to see Esther playing the piano almost perfectly. She asks why Esther pretended not to know how to play, and the girl replies that she did it for her benefit. Later, the couple argues about Esther and their argument spirals out of control. Esther seems pleased as she hears them from the other room. One day, Sister Abigail comes over to their house. She talks to the parents about Esther, thinking that there might be something wrong with her. She lists a few things that she might have done in the past, such as hurting other children. When Esther hears it all, she goes and gets Max, telling her she needs her help so the mean lady doesn't take her away. Kate thinks that Abigail might have a point, but John believes she's overreacting. Kate insists they take her to a therapist and he agrees. Meanwhile, Esther tells Max to find the keys to the treehouse. However, she uses them to get a gun out of John's safe. She takes the bullets out of it, leaving only one inside, and then points it at Max, scaring her. As Abigail leaves in her car, Esther takes Max to a bridge. She tells Max they will scare Abigail so much she'll never want to come back. Esther then pushes Max onto the road and Abigail almost hits the girl, crashing her car. Abigail goes to Max as the child cries, when Esther suddenly hits her with a hammer. She then instructs Max to help her push Abigail off the road. They roll her down, but she's still alive. Esther appears and finishes her off with a hammer. The two of them go into the treehouse, where Esther proceeds to hide her bloody clothes and the weapon of the crime. She scares Max, saying they'll send her to jail too just for helping her. Daniel sees them climb down the treehouse, but Esther sees him too. Later that night, she goes into his room with a scalpel, threatening him to keep quiet. The boy urinates in his bed. As John and Kate take Esther to see Browning, she talks to the couple as Esther waits outside. The therapist says that the girl is fine, and adds that Kate might be the problem. She thinks Kate feels inadequate as a mother and is taking it out on Esther. John agrees with Browning's reasoning. When they come back home, Kate gets a call from the orphanage, saying Abigail hasn't returned since the previous day. The police search for her and find her body where Esther left it. An officer then talks to Kate and John, saying they have no suspects. Meanwhile, Esther is in her room admiring a gruesome painting she has made of the house. Kate searches online for information about disturbed children and shows her findings to her husband. Once again he disagrees with Kate, and she tells him she won't be seeing Dr. Browning anymore. Concerned about Esther, Kate says she'll contact the orphanage in Russia where she came from. When she makes the call, she discovers there are no records of Esther previous to her arrival in the US. The next day, John wakes up Esther to take her to the dentist, but she says she doesn't want to go. They spend the day painting together and Esther tells him that she thinks Kate doesn't like her. In the meantime, Kate is taking the other children to school and asks them about Esther. They lie, saying she's never done anything wrong. That night, Esther comes in the kitchen telling Kate she has a present for her. She gives her some flowers, picked from the place where Kate's daughter's ashes were scattered. Kate gets upset and grabs her, but John interjects. Later that night, Esther goes to the garage and breaks her own arm. Back in bed, she calls for John and tells him her arm hurts. When he looks at it, he sees it's been broken. Back from the hospital, John tucks Esther in their bed and Kate comes in. He confronts her, but his wife says she didn't grab her that hard. Later that night, Kate buys 2 wine bottles and gets a little drunk. She proceeds to throw the rest of the open bottle down the drain. The next morning, Kate drives the kids to school. When Daniel's backpack rips apart, Kate goes to help him. Esther quickly puts the car in drive with Max still in there and exits the vehicle. Kate runs after the car until it's finally stopped by the snow. That night, Dr. Browning visits them and Kate swears that she put the car in park and that Max is covering for Esther. John shows her the second wine bottle which Esther found. The therapist tells her that she reserved a spot for her in a rehabilitation center. After Kate defends herself, they don't believe her about the wine or about the car incident. John thinks she's being manipulative and gives her a week to go to rehab or he'll leave with the kids. In the meantime, Esther threatens Max, saying she'll shoot Kate if she tells on her. Later, Daniel goes into Max's room and she tells him about Abigail and the treehouse. As Esther eavesdrops, he says he'll get the stuff from the treehouse. Kate gets up during the night and sneaks into Max's room. All of a sudden, Esther turns the light on. Esther shows her the diary Kate's been keeping, letting her know she's read the whole thing. Esther tries to upset her, but Kate doesn't fall for it. The next day, Kate finds Esther's hidden Bible and inspects it. She sees pictures of men inside and also notices the word Sarn Institute on it. After searching for it online, she calls the associated number and learns that it's actually a mental hospital. In the meantime, Daniel sneaks out of the house to get the stuff from the treehouse. Esther follows him there and starts pouring fuel over the evidence, then lights it and continues pouring fuel over Daniel. She proceeds to lock him inside the burning treehouse. Daniel gets on the roof, crying for help, but his mom is too busy investigating Esther. As Esther watches him, he falls onto a wooden beam and then to the ground. Kate finally sees the fire and rushes outside. As Esther is about to kill Daniel with a rock, Max pushes her away. Kate gets to the scene before Esther can do more harm. After some time in the hospital, the doctor lets them know that Daniel has a serious neck injury and might not remember what passed. Kate tells John what she found out about Esther, but he's still not convinced. While they are arguing, Esther goes to Daniel's room and Max follows her. Max sees Esther suffocating Daniel with his pillow and rushes to get her parents. The alarm in Daniel's room goes off and the doctors manage to bring him back. Kate can't take it any longer and slaps Esther. The medical staff grab her and sedate her. Later, Kate wakes up and begs John not to let Esther near Max. That night, with Kate in the hospital, John gets drunk. Esther walks downstairs dressed up like an adult and sits next to John, who doesn't understand what's happening. Esther tries kissing him, but he recoils. He explains that he doesn't love her the way him and Kate love each other. John tells her to go to her room, but she tells him not to talk to her like she's a child. He says he will be calling the orphanage the next day about her. Esther goes to her room and cries. In the meantime, Kate gets a call from a doctor in the Sarn Institute. He recognizes Esther and tells her to get her family out of the house, then to call the cops. He tells her that Esther isn't a little girl, but a grown woman with some kind of hormone disorder that makes her look like a child. The doctor adds that Esther was one of the most violent patients and has scars on her hands and neck. He tells Kate that she has killed at least 7 people. Kate then desperately tries to get home. Back at the house, Esther trashes her room and removes all of her makeup used to hide her real age. John goes to check on her and finds her paintings all over the wall. Kate tries calling him as she's driving home, but the power goes out in the house before he can answer. She then calls the police. John gets a flashlight and looks for Esther. She stabs him from behind and watches him suffer on the floor. Esther proceeds to stab him continually until he's gone. Max sees the whole thing and Esther chases her next. Kate finally arrives and immediately sees John's body. She realizes Max is in trouble and tries to find her. She looks in her room and then into the bathroom. Suddenly, Esther shoots her. Kate then hides just outside of her bedroom, on top of the glass roof, and Esther doesn't see her. In the meantime, Max is hiding in the garden just below the glass roof. After Max breaks a vase, Esther hears the noise and goes after her. Kate sees her daughter and instructs her to stay there, hidden. Esther goes after Max and sees Kate, shooting after her again, and then shooting after Max too. Kate then breaks the glass roof, falling right on top of Esther. She takes the gun and picks up Max, leaving Esther behind. She walks out into the forest as the police arrives to her house. However, Esther is no longer there. She reappears running after Kate and Max with a knife. They fall on the frozen lake and struggle, with Esther desperately going after Kate. Max picks up the gun and misses, breaking the ice instead. Both of them fall inside the water and wrestle, until Kate incapacitates Esther. As she's crawling out, Esther grabs her again, saying, "Please, don't let me die, mommy." Kate yells, "I'm not your effing mommy," and sends her back into the lake with a badass kick. Thanks for watching. If you like our content, please like the video and don't forget to subscribe.